Thanks for joining us again. We're in the high 20s now on our episodes. This is getting quite consistent over half a year now. It's pretty fun.
People are watching. It's great. People say, hey, I watched your episode. Something's happening.
I got a text yesterday from a guy we used to work with, and he was commenting on one of the episodes, and he says it was giving him PTSD. It was triggering his PTSD. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that tracks.
No, that's good. So today we're going to try something totally unique to what we've been doing before, right? Obviously, usually we have a topic and we just sort of just chat about it, and maybe with a guest or not. But today, what we want to do is we have a topic, yes, but we actually kind of want to workshop it, right? So, we've got a lucid chart we can pull up and sort of talk through, or just talk through this concept, because we want to add some capabilities to our platform, right? To DevGrid, to the NJobs platform. And we're toying with these ideas, and we thought, hey, need to go report to the podcast. Why don't we record this conversation a little bit as we go through this workshop? Because a lot of what needs to sort of be discussed is how do we draw lines and how do we frame things and all type of stuff. And sometimes that conversation can be really enlightening and helpful for people. So,
and if we have feedback of that, that'd be great. If any of the people listening want to give us feedback, like, hey, that sounds great, or that's absolutely terrible, this is a good opportunity just to tell us we're crazy. We know we're crazy, but, telling us is great too.
So the topic that we want to get into is a concept that I'm going to use a very generic term, tech debt. But I think the place where we need to start, Jason, is like, what do we mean by that, right? Because I think even you and I have very different definitions. When we say that word, what all does that encompass? Why don't we start there? Why don't you lay out sort of how you see it, and then we can compare and contrast and go from there.
Yeah, I've actually had this conversation quite often at different companies, different people, because it does get sometimes conflated with multiple meanings. Sometimes people get a defined tech debt once, and then it's there for their entire career. This is what I mean by tech debt, and that's the only definition. But when I look at it, I look at shortcuts that you've taken to meet a business need. So your implementation might not be as perfect as you want it to be. It doesn't meet all of your cleanliness standards. It doesn't matter. We're being paid to have a business outcome. Have your code perfectly shiny and formatted. It typically will have shortcuts, right? You might have your linting rules aren't perfect. You've got some code formatting that isn't quite right. Maybe a loop isn't as performant as you want it to be, but the business outcomes are met. You might have certain engineers who want to go back and redesign that. They want to fix something. They might want to have it broken up to be a little bit more, quote unquote, scalable to their definition of scalable. Or you might have certain things that you want in your vision. They're not mandatory for meeting the business outcomes, but they're on your long-term technology strategy. But if you don't do those, you don't have time, you're pushed for a quick, we need this done now. Well, that goes into your tech debt bank, in my opinion here. And over time, that's going to add up, but it's there for a reason, is that we have tech debt, quote unquote, measured and called that for a reason. And that's because you work on an app, it's a little bit slower to build on. Well, you can see the history of this little tumor that was built on there, that little tumor, that little cancerous cell. That's all tech debt that's just been left to sit and fester for a long time. We all seen it. We all know what it is, but it's not just because people didn't care. It's because we have outcomes to meet. We have to get this stuff into production so that we can start getting value out of it. But you'll take shortcuts, and they happen. That's okay. It's there for a reason. But how do you track it? Like, that's why we're here, is seeing how do we track it? How do we look at it? How do we evaluate it? And how much do you put towards it in your technology spend?
Yeah, no, for sure. And so that's a good definition. When I think about tech debt in general, I have a much broader thought, which it's actually probably not very accurate and very, very technically precise, but it all goes into one bucket in my head, right? Like anything non-functional kind of goes into this tech debt bucket in my head. And that it could be like exactly what you just said, all the things you just said, where it's like, okay, we're delivering this thing. We have this particular standard we normally want to meet. We're not going to quite meet that standard in order to get the feature out the door. You're putting that on the credit card effectively to say, okay, hey, we're going to cut some corners, but we want to capture it that we did it this way, and we're going to come back and fix it, right? So an example of that might be, like you said, maybe some test coverage, or, maybe we didn't set up resiliency as much as we should have. Maybe there should be some replication here and we didn't do that, or whatever. And we're playing a little fast and loose and those types of things. So that are very explicit. Like, hey, we know we're taking this on, we're negotiating it, maybe with our business partners. There's like a time sensitivity to what they're doing. And so you're like, all right, cool. We'll cut our standards on the short term, but we're all agreeing we're going to come back and fix it. That's the type of stuff you're talking about. I totally agree. I also broaden it though, too. I use the term non-functional. It's any work that needs to be done that doesn't directly tie to business functionality, in my mind, is kind of in that sort of tech debt squishy definition, right? And that could be, to your point, like it could be something that you explicitly said, hey, we're not going to do this because it's not up to standard, but we recognize we're compromising a little bit. Or it could be something where I think, and this is what happens to most people, right? The standards change. You've released something, and then the standards change. Like, okay, hey, cool, we're rolling with our Struts Java JVM app, and we're kicking butt with that. And then all of a sudden the world changes around you. You're like, well, we want to containerize and not just sit in these JVM WebSphere environments. And it's like, oh, well, maybe we want to break it apart and go Microsoft, like all these different things. Those now become debt to sort of bring that thing, quote unquote, up to standard. Or new security standards drop, right? Like new tools. Here's a new security scanning tool, and now you have 10,000 issues you got to go sort out because they look at your code a little bit differently, and now there's all these things.
Yeah, I don't necessarily look at those as debt. That's new features that a different team has asked you to meet. It's still a business outcome, in my opinion, that the business outcome is now you have a different line to hit for security and safety. That's the new business requirement because it's now changed. So that's the way I look at it. Yes, I hear what you're saying, that you're modernizing your app maybe. Well, I don't know if I see that as debt versus something else. I don't know, but I could definitely see the vulnerabilities to new scanner, but now the new business outcome is to have this new scanner show green. So that I bundle that all together is directly attributing to your business value and outcome is that it's even more secure than it was before.
So yeah, totally fair point. To argue the other side, the business doesn't care about that little scanner. That's coming from someone that isn't the business almost entirely. Like theoretically, the business should care, and the business will care if you get hacked, obviously.
Well, yeah, that's where you make them care. If they don't care, that's where you have to make them care about it because they should be caring. You said it exactly, is that they should be, but your job is to help them see that and help them care about it so that they don't ask you, why is this all taking so long? Well, because we have this new security standard that we have to meet. If you want your stuff, I have to do this. So, let's work on this together.
And this is where the natural sort of tension is, right? Like the security standard is not being set by the business, is not being set by the app team. The business leaders that I've worked with, or even put myself in those seats, that's a necessary evil. I wouldn't want to spend my budget on it, right? Like I want you to spend your budget on it because it's not my requirement. Now, some technology products, maybe you do have that, right? Like, hey, I'm a bank and I got to be able to do this thing in order to hit the thing. It's got to be PCI compliant. Maybe that becomes a business requirement. And maybe this is a different framing. Maybe tech debt's the wrong framing for this entire conversation. Maybe it's a conversation between strategic and maintenance, or I don't know what the right word is to balance on the opposite of strategic. Keep the lights on, BAU, all those types of things. And maybe that's the balance that we have to figure out. When we think about what we're talking about for our product, right? Like what we're hoping to do and what we're talking to customers with and working on, right, is they want to understand the business outcome that they're looking for from us as the software provider is how much work do I have to get up to snuff? Whatever that means, right?
That's hard to answer. That's very hard.
Super hard. Now, we're relatively well positioned to do that, but whether or not we can do it effectively, we got to work it out. Vulnerabilities are an obvious place. End of life are an obvious place. You have tools like Sonar and stuff like that that make a lot of suggestions around code smells and all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of different areas in which we can figure some stuff out. If we say tech debt specifically, if you think about it from a strategic standpoint, hey, I've got a budget. I'm going into annual planning. Maybe my company is putting a lot of effort on security or maybe a lot on resiliency or whatever. And I need to explain or quantify, maybe as a better word, all of the work that needs to be done to harden my applications to the point where we feel like they're secure. We're not going to have incidents, or they're going to be no fault incidents, things where it's like stuff just happens, but we're going to be as well prepared for that as we can be. We're not going to get out of compliance on end of life. We're current on everything. Like, what does that look like? And this is why I use the term tech debt, even though I agree with your point around it not being really debt because those things just kind of show up. It's like the stuff you do to keep your house up, right? You got to fix the deck. You got to put new windows in every few years or whatever, right? So call it maintenance, call it debt, call it non-strategic work, call it BAU. I'm not sure what the right term is, but I think that to me is the thing we're driving at is trying to give leaders an ability to with some precision and some data say, okay, I need X number of dollars this coming year to burn this down and get, maybe I've got a big vulnerability backlog or whatever the thing is, burn this down and also to anticipate what's going to be coming.
We're waterproofing the basement instead of buying a new sump pump to pump it out all the time versus putting on a sunroom. We're trying to do the improvements to make the quality of life better for not only the end users, but could be the developers trying to work on something that takes less time to develop on. We're going from a complex Kubernetes deployment to something maybe a little bit simpler with Fargate ECS. That's hard. Those are hard conversations to have because at times there's no direct business value. I think to your original definition of this is that you don't see a value right away. Maybe there will be over time. Maybe there will be some improvements in speed to market with things, but it takes a very long-term strategic thinker on product business organization to see, hey, look, that is valuable. I've done this before. Yeah, let's put some money in our bank for that to make sure that the technology team has what they need to get it done. Where the money comes, it's different all over the place and who's doing what, but it's still time then. The dev team isn't working on those easy to see, financially predictable features.
Exactly, right? You have to look at the life cycle of these things. Incentives matter. Think about like business leaders in some of these places that we've been, right? The business leader doesn't usually stay in that seat for more than 3 years. That person is not incentivized to make sure to invest in the technology platform for the next 5 to 7 years. That's not how they're incentivized. They're not thinking that way. The good ones, to your point, understand that it can't be garbage or else it compromises the stability and compromises their ability to go faster as they go. But it is hard when you realize that because those guys, if it's a technology company where you're selling products out to customers, obviously it's like anything else. It's like the immediate versus the hidden costs, right? And we're really talking about all the hidden costs. I can paint the house and have it look great, but if the siding or the wood is rotting, it's only going to look great for a month. Well, it's okay. I just need to sell the house and then it's not my problem anymore. Like there's a lot of that going on, right? But to your point, if we just keep using the house analogy, it's like, cool, we could keep fixing the drywall in the garage because it has a leak in the roof, or we just put a new roof on and then we don't have any more leaks. But those are expensive things.
It takes a lot of money to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, back to our conversation, what we're trying to think about for the product is what are all those things that are observable, right? Like some of these get really hard, right? The thing you were talking about, maybe I'm going to refactor or replatform to help make it easier to move faster in the future. I'm going to spend a certain amount of capacity or a certain number of dollars on going from, whatever, some giant monolith to microservices or vice versa, or whatever you think is going to be faster. And then you're saying, okay, that's going to make us 5 to 10 to 20% faster for the foreseeable, year and a half or whatever. That's a conversation, but that's incredibly difficult to quantify.
And nor should you. You shouldn't quantify that all up front either, though. I think that would be the wrong approach to say, I've seen this happen where I want to replatform everything. How long is it going to take?
6 months.
I've even heard worse. It could be 2 to 3 years is pitched. About 2 or 3 years, a couple $1 million. Like, no, it never happens then because the technology leader can never see how to do this as incremental value and small little chunks here or there. Replatform this one as part of like a new build out, a new feature going here. Okay, well, that feature is here. I'm going to do it in a new platform and just slowly chip away. And so it's being able to sell those small chunks instead of selling a whole new platform, which was never going to get any traction.
For sure. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think the area where I think the customers are looking for is like, okay, what are the places that we could sort of prove that there's work? We mentioned the security and out of date stuff. I think we could do some things around incidents. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say something like an incident costs on average, if your incident is a duration of an hour, it probably costs 100 to 200 to 500 hours worth of man hours in terms of all of the swirl and drama around it, right? Stuff like that, where we can say, let's quantify the ecosystem and let's say, okay, here's the observable problems. The observable problems are you have these incidents, you have these vulnerabilities, you have these defects, you have these software support schedules that are coming due. You're sitting on an operating system that's no longer going to be supported or whatever. And then quantifying, putting numbers to each of those, right? We've done some experiments with this, right? Like on classifying a vulnerability. this is the brutal thing about the vulnerability management space, to just sidebar for a second. There's so much CYA involved on it. There's so much noise that these tools put out, things that are like technically insecure, but the likelihood of them ever actually being able to be exploited.
You can't exploit it. You can't.
Is so tiny. But the reality is, again, back to human incentives, it's less effort to just do the thing that the tool is asking you to do than to create the justification and the evidence needed to not do it. At that point, it's just like, fine, I'll go upgrade this or I'll do that or whatever. I don't love that. That was actually one of the things while you were talking about the security stuff, the business caring, like as a business leader, having been on both sides of that fence, I look askance at some of the security tools. Like, I'm like, whatever, right? Like, come to me if it's a super high critical and it's exploitable. Otherwise, it's just sort of extra noise that these security tools are creating. Yeah, sure, we do because we don't want to have not done it.
You don't want to be that person to stand up in the meeting that we're not doing that. I agree not fixing that. And you don't want to be the person to say that in the meeting. That's the wrong look.
I remember having a conversation with a CISO about this, with a Chief Information Security Officer. They were making the argument that we had to fix all the mediums that were coming out of these tools.
Ugh.
Now, to be fair, there's a regulated company and there's a lot of forces they need to be able to justify and all these different things. But I said, practically speaking, that's totally nonsense. And the way we know it's nonsense is because if any of these things were actually real problems, we would be dropping everything we're doing and fixing them immediately. And the way we know that is because that's what we do when we find real problems, right? Like when Log4j happened, for example, like what was that, 2.5, 3 years ago now? In the industry, that probably cut the overall development. I mean, it was a December. It was right around Christmas, like 3 years ago, right?
Oh, everything ground to a halt. Nobody did
anything but Log4j for weeks.
It was researching it. It was running scans again, trying to figure out, are we susceptible to it? Well, it's Log4j, but it's Log4j shell or all these different things. It was such a drag on everybody, not just developers, everybody.
Totally. And my point is, that's how we mobilize when there's real risks. All these other things are like, oh, this tool found the thing. There's now evidence that there was a problem. If somehow down the road we haven't fixed that, then it's going to be really bad. We're going to look really bad. It'll look negligent. It'll be all those things. And maybe it is. Maybe you can make the argument that it is negligent. My point is, with all of the security tools, finding a way to understand, and this is where we've done some work, is like, okay, can we take a classification and understand the level of effort involved, right?
These things come up often, though. Mediums pop sometimes multiple new a day.
Yeah.
Definitely multiple a day. Yes. Well, multiple day per application because they just creep up and creep up. It's not something that's just you fix your mediums and you're good for 6 months. No, you might have new things that come in all the time because of a new scanner and something else new came in.
I mean,
so it's a lot of work.
I was thinking I think you meant just the database. Like we pull NIST database and everybody like on a daily basis, and it grows by hundreds every day. Like it's like there's new vulnerabilities constantly being sort of announced and determined and all those different things. And again, it's good that we do that, right? Like we go and disclose them, but at the same time, they kind of create a lot of noise that makes them seem more important to everybody.
But it's a good point, though. But it's a good point to bring into the pain of this because we're looking at the maintenance to keep the lights on. How do we keep this stuff from creeping up? It's more complicated than it seems because there's a lot of tools that are noisy. There's a lot of tools that might have a false positive. The overhead of trying to keep an eye on all of those from all the different tools that you have and make sure that you're on top of it and you clean it and you upgrade, that's real tangible work that has to be done by a development team to keep your app secure or check the box secure, whatever, that doesn't matter. It takes the right type of conversations to make sure that you don't have a business partner that says, hey, Duncan, why is your stuff not done yet? What's going on? Tell me about it. Like, what are you working on so much? Oh, we got the scanner, we got this, the security team. Oh, okay, how can we work together on that? Those are the conversations that you need to be aware of and think through. Yeah, there's a lot of complexities with these vulnerabilities. We got to do it, whether we have to do it because it's a truly critical or a high vulnerability, or we got to do it because the security team has enough teeth to make us do whatever they want. Either way, it's got to get done. And those are conversations that need to be understood and had to get to where the app needs to be.
There's classifications on vulnerabilities. We can look at the vulnerability and understand, okay, what's the remediation? It's bumping some NPM package to a new patch version. Okay, cool. That's pretty minimal. That costs you however many minutes or hours you want to say. Then there's major versions and minor versions, and there's re-platforming and all those different things. There's some quantification we can do on that that's pretty interesting. I think that we've made some progress on.
I took over an app at one point in time that we could only test in production. That was it. That was the only ability to test this data, was by launching to production, opening up a feature flag to a developer or somebody else on the team that would test the feature in production with their own personal data. Not just I had a team with this, I saw also multiple other teams in the industry, because being that it's regulated work, it's private information, it's personal information. A lot of these third parties don't always have a good sandbox to mimic real people, not just users, but people with social security numbers and with a mortgage or a bank account or a credit history. A lot of them are set up to only work in project. You might get a sandbox that's kind of okay, but the ability to get really good data and test the scenarios just doesn't exist at some third parties. It should, but the reality is that those companies aren't always incentivized to do that, to have a really good mock environment. And so we were deploying to prod testing, we'd have an incident or it wouldn't work. So we had to go back and do that over and over again. But that data enabled me to have conversations and say, hey, look, business partners, look at what we're doing here. We're deploying, we have incidents, we have rework and rework. Let's take a step back. Let's try to develop some sort of a mock or another layer so that we don't have this problem anymore. So it was actually a good conversation to have, because not only did they say, yeah, do what you got to do, but also I'm going to go yell at them because that should have that. And so that transparency was twofold. One, it built the credibility with your business partners and let them work with their third party, but then gave me some time to build a better mock and testing platform without having to argue for more time, because they saw the pain.
As we think about our customers and the way they want to use DevGrid, we've mentioned there's a bunch of tech debt that we can observe and provide intelligent measuring on. Something like that, though, that's not observable, right? Like the team's going to have to articulate.
Sure it is. You can observe the amount of deployments you have. I have to deploy this to test the product.
But we can't.
There's all that time.
Yeah, but I'm not saying there isn't evidence of it, but it's not something that the platform could just extract and be like, you need to refactor yourself, right?
No.
No. So what I'm getting at is, because like I could say, okay, you have 10 vulnerabilities. They're each going to take you an hour. You have 10 hours worth of work to do or something like that, right? There's a formula that can be done on those vulnerabilities. It's sophisticated based upon the details of the vulnerabilities. But those types of refactors or adding tests, well, of course, tests is a bad example. Adding mocks or those types of things are going to require some input from the teams. And I think back to things like self-identified issues, like as a registration of those types of things, when you sort of, that was one of the things we saw at one of the banks, where you had this process of articulating, essentially raising your hand and being like, hey, we've got a problem. And we're going to document the fact that we have this problem. It could be we're behind on our vulnerabilities. It could be like what you just described. We're testing in production too much and it creates risks. And so it was kind of a risk management process to sort of document it. You started the stopwatch on yourself. So once you raised your hand and did it and said that, you needed to have a plan to close it out. But it also covered you in case something bad happened. You had already raised your hand and be like, hey, we know this is a problem. As we build in this sort of, again, using the crude term tech debt, I'm sure we'll come up with a better term before we productionalize it. But if we build that in, like, how do you think for those manual sort of documentation pieces, that's kind of like an SII, it's like, hey, we've got this thing we need to do. Should that be a Jira ticket or something similar? Or do we think we should have, like, within DevGrid, our own module for people to register, hey, we've got this task we need to do. It's a refactor, it's a replatform, whatever. This is the level of effort involved.
Take a look at our GitHub board and then answer that, because we have a lot of things that go on our boards, even at a company our size, that we'll likely never get to. Not for any ill intention. It's just that there's a lot of things that come up. It always falls below the line of trying to get new features out or something else. Now, take a company our size and explode that to an enterprise with 10,000 people. There's Jira tickets that have probably been there for 10 years.
So what do we think's the answer? Do we think having some kind of like open issue or long-standing issue or SII style registry where people can say, okay, hey, this service should be multi-region. And maybe it's linked to a ticket. Maybe there is a ticket or an epic or something like that in a backlog of the SDLC tool, of the project management tool, but it's also a way to sort of register almost on the balance sheet of the application. I'm going to totally torture this metaphor, right? You got your balance sheet, you got all your current liabilities, the bills you got to pay, you got your vulnerabilities, but then you've also got non-current vulnerability, like this big debt. Like your mortgage isn't considered a current liability on your personal balance sheet, but it's definitely a liability, like it's sitting out there, right? And so you have to be able to kind of register that liability to say, hey, we need to upgrade this thing, it's 500 hours worth of work, or it's 1,000 hours worth of work. Just be aware it's there. It's in the backlog. It's not coming off the balance sheet without us putting some money against it. Do we think that that's something that we feel like people want?
I think it depends. There could be a stigma associated with SIIs. I knew multiple people who just didn't want to document something because they were afraid of what it might look to them and how that might perceive their application. If they're documenting all these SIIs or these issues, I don't want to put myself out there like that where I'm inviting scrutiny. That's partially cultural
but those
as well.
people, I don't mean to be dismissive, but I'm going to be dismissive of those people, right? Like, because we're going to have all the calculated stuff. I'm going to make up numbers. You owe 1,500 hours, man hours, or 15,000 man hours. And here's the breakdown of what that is. Yeah, everybody's going to have that. The question is, do we think our users would want the ability to sort of add in manual? Like you think about like a personal finance tool. We won't name any names. I know you and I like the same one, but they've got all the stuff where you can plug in all the bank accounts and all the investment stuff and you see all that stuff. But then you also like, hey, I owe my buddy 10 grand or I owe my buddy a few $1,000. Like I could put that on the list too, even though there's no evidence of it anywhere other than a handshake. I can make sure it's there and it's calculated and I have it in my sort of P&L. Like, do we think that DevGrid needs something like that? Or do we think it should only ever be coming from the other sources?
I don't see a lot of people doing this right now. I can't answer you directly on this, but I think it takes the right person to want to do these things and to think strategically around that. I have not met a lot of individuals who would be proactive enough without pushing them to start documenting where they want their applications to be. SIIs has a negative connotation to it, but it's also their own technology strategy. Where do I want to be with these? Where are these problems that I'm having that I want to solve? People know these problems exist. Go talk to the dev teams, and in 10 minutes, you'll have a list of about 20. I promise that. But that's a hard question to answer because it's going to take the right person to want to put the effort into doing it and putting that all together and starting to track it and inviting the scrutiny around it, because that's still a real thing.
Yeah. So do you not think that documenting it doesn't help you get attention on getting the thing done? You're essentially making the case for the thing that needs to happen. Maybe you're saying, hey, we need to be multi-region for this one particular application. And then you document what's the problem statement, what's the solution, how is this going to move the needle, here's the level of effort involved. And then that kind of gets baked into your overall cost stuff, your overall projection of debt.
I think if we help people to justify it, right? What a lot of people struggle with is, we've mentioned this a few times, is justifying it. How do I justify the spend? But they're not asking the right questions. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. I want to shove their face in the water and say, hey, this is how to justify the spend here. There's some AI you can put in there to help justify things, and we'll have the rest of the context of the app that we could feed into the engine. It's with the right person to see it. There is a lot of value that could be shown there with helping people to justify things, to get the velocity behind their own mental models of, this is how I do it. It could be like a trainer as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, so we're responding to customers, right? Like customers are telling us, hey, making up numbers, but going to annual planning and I've got this portfolio of applications and I say I need $5 million to do KTLO, keep the lights on, which is kind of tech debt-y type stuff, right? Like you got to do all the updates and the maintenance and all that type of stuff. But it's all kind of like finger in the air type of calculations, right? There's no real data associated. So what ends up happening is they're like, yeah, cool. You have 2 million, figure it out. Now, to some degree, that's going to happen because that's just the way of the world. But also, if you don't have data, it's just your opinion. So somebody else's opinion is just as valid and whatever, right? Like it's all made up things anyways. We're responding to them saying, hey, help us. You guys have all of our data to give us a way to defend ourselves and say, hey, here's our forecast for what we need based upon this information and this data. And so in that context, where I'm coming back to it is saying like, okay, in that context, where I've got people who are trying to budget a year and make multi-million-dollar asks for their portfolios, and maybe even up to some levels, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars for their portfolios, to think about how to think about that. But again, it's all like, well, we'll do 20% is going to be this, right? Or 15% will be this. And as opposed to something that's more explicitly calculated based upon the actual application. Because you might have an application, if I had to guess, right? Like a 2-year-old application is probably like the cheapest to run. The new stuff, you're doing a lot of work, you haven't fully hardened it, whatever. Something's between kind of like that 36 to 72 months.
Yeah.
It's pretty chill.
It's baked a little bit. Had the security patches. It's good. It's humming along.
Nothing major is going to come out of date. So those types of things theoretically would have a little bit of a different cost curve for those types of things. And so in that context, the question is, do we think engineering teams and leaders would say, I want to get these specific projects that we need to do to get ourselves hardened, I want to get those documented and into the planning process? Or to your point, which I think is a fair point, most of them don't think that strategically. Most of them don't think that ahead of schedule to be like, oh, let's get into that planning process. Like, or would that require like an organizational?
They want to do things. They I need to do this. And some people just do this. They just start to work on it without asking for permission. And sometimes that actually works. I can tell you, sometimes it actually works. And sometimes that's a preferred way of doing it. But you've got those big migrations that take a little bit more planning, take a little bit more thought. They take a little bit more visibility from somebody else above you to say, hey, look, yeah, I grant you my approval on this because this is important. Those are the things you might need a little bit more air cover for to justify, why is it taking so long? Oh, because you're doing this now. Oh, okay, that makes total sense. And here's the justification. Here's the apps that you're covering. Here's the reason. All these things. Here's the big top level initiative that it ties into. Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, you think about the project management side of the house, there's all these different tools for sort of idea management. The things that you could do, and you're sort of experimenting with new features as an idea. Maybe you're doing some design, prototyping, but it doesn't like go into your boards. Like, it's not actual work yet. I guess what I'm saying is, does the industry need something like that for the tech side, where it's saying, okay, hey, maybe we should refactor this from Java into Go, or maybe we should migrate this from a VM to a container, or from on-prem to cloud, or whatever, right? Like, whatever the thing is, that's more kind of like a purely technology, not that there isn't a business outcome element to it, but it's a technology-driven activity. Prior to it being scheduled or planned, do we need a place to sort of, quote unquote, register those things?
I mean, we already see the process exists. There's SIIs, there's other things that these registries do exist. They typically are in a Jira ticket, or in PowerPoint decks, or in Archer, or in other, or ServiceNow has something. There are places for this, but something that's engineers centric that helps you to think through the justification, how to justify it. Why do you want to do this? And maybe going through the justification, you can't justify it anymore. And so I'm not even going to bother with it because it's not worth the time. It's an assumption worth testing.
Interesting. So
without the coach, without the tutor, without the, like, hey, what about this app? And start to help you think through things. I think without all that, it's just another worksheet. It's just another Word document. It's just another Jira. What sets it apart is having the context of where you are in the environment, what other apps are out there, and the blast radius for something like this, and start to help you think through this and the scope that it would be.
Well, okay. So you're basically saying, if we were to give you a way of manually adding debt to the system, you don't see a ton of value in that by itself, because it being included in the calculations and it bubbling up and having the visibility and tied to the application and being able to kind of like have that record, you think that by itself is just another form of a spreadsheet?
It is. I think, in my opinion, why not just put it in Confluence at that point and link to it?
Wow. I wildly disagree with you. It's interesting that you think that. So it's November right now, right? So you're still at one of the banks, and there was 3 or 4, medium-sized technical initiatives or technical gaps that you saw in your portfolio. And there was a situation where all of your like must-dos were sort of calculated and you had numbers associated with them. You think that those should-dos, just leave them in Confluence documented, and then
here's maybe Confluence isn't the right, but Jira would be. There's a lot of automations in Jira. There's a lot of sizings in Jira. There's already likely other tools built with Jira that somebody is using to either come up with a priority list or a capacity list, or here's how much capacity that we have as a team. Here's the roadmap. And so I have put Jira epics in just as placeholders to slot them in against those. And seeing the relative priority based off of capacity, that's something that it's a tool that other people around you are using already. They're used to seeing lists like that. So now if I'm going to take you to a separate tool and start talking about it, well, how much effort is this going to be? Where does it land in priorities? And you're jumping back into another tool.
Again, I think we're talking about different things because it was interesting. Like earlier, you said stuff goes into Jira and then it just drifts into the background and never gets remembered.
That depends on what it is, though. If we're talking about a big initiative, maybe you feel more passionate about it. Maybe you feel like this is my one thing that I want to do. I'm talking about the small little things that are like, I can't test my app in lower levels. That's probably not going to be big enough for you to track with a large epic. It's going to be a conversation that you have that's going to be tracked in a small ticket that never gets worked on. But I want to go multi-region. That's going to get a lot more attention. That's going to have a lot more work and a lot more thought around it. It's going to get the buy-in from other places. So it depends on how big it is, how much effort it is, and how much you want to put behind it too.
So when you think about like that SII process, now that was a very specific risk management process, but
those are real issues. These could be a problem issues.
My point being, would a streamlined process like that could then, to your point, like, again, it's trying to provide the aggregation of all the things, right? So you got your Jira tickets that have your backlogs, that you got all the program manager types that are running around trying to create a portfolio and create a hierarchy and all those different things to actually get work planned. 100%. The question is, do we think that there needs to be a quantification process of those things to bundle it with the other must-do tech debt type stuff, right? Like if we've got a bunch of resiliency work, and maybe the answer is maybe it's like a tagging regimen out of Jira. Like maybe Jira is actually where you capture all those things and we observe it out of Jira. Like maybe that's the answer. Because I hear what you're saying. Like, I mean, it seems silly if I've got a Jira ticket over here, why would I create an object over here in this other system? But also that assumes you've got a Jira ticket already groomed out and already sized out, and you've got it in a backlog somewhere, you've got it in a priority list somewhere or a roadmap somewhere, right?
Yeah, and it's captured somewhere. Either it's just a note on your desk or a Jira ticket is typically where people are going to go, or it could be your Trello board, it could be your GitHub issue. They're captured somewhere typically because that's where you live every day. If I have to go to another system to capture an idea, I might not unless it's really easy to do. The easier it is to capture that, the more likely it is to get in a place that is going to get attention. It just depends. It's hard to say because everybody has a different workflow. You're a large enterprise, you're going to be in Jira. You're just going to create a Jira ticket. You might bookmark it. You might have your own special epic of things that will never get worked on, but you're collecting them. You might have an icebox, things that will never work, but there's a few in there that you try to justify every now and again. You're already living in a place like that.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for kicking around with us, and hopefully this was interesting and useful to you, and stay tuned. We'll have something along these lines in the coming months. Sounds like we actually need to maybe go back to the drawing board on some of the ideas. So it'll be interesting. So let us know if you have any thoughts on it, if you have suggestions or things you'd like to see. So thanks all.